Good morning, boys and girls, and welcome to reading class. We are going to be continuing on with the one and only Ivan. And when we last were reading, Ivan was flipping all of the pieces of paper that he had painted, he had finger painted, to Julia. And her and her dad decided they were going to drop them off to Mac on their way out. And so Ivan was so frustrated because he wanted them to look at the pictures and be able to see what he was creating so that they could help to save Ruby. So let's look at our questions for today and our vocabulary. So we have interior, that would be the inside. Untamed is wild. Weary is tired. Contented is calm. Placid, let's say placid is calm and contented would be happy. Bicker would be to argue. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to our questions. And our multiple choice question is, what does the lady from the zoo use to get Ruby into the box? And what will Bob miss when Ivan leaves? All right, let's get to our story. Okay, so this is right here, as you can see, this is just a recap. I'll just read a couple of lines before we get started on our new information. All right, so it says, Julia thumbs through the towering stack of paintings. They might not be blobs to Ivan. Let's leave those in the office, George suggests. Mac will probably try selling them, although why anyone would pay $40 for a finger painting of a 2-year-old that a 2-year-old could do, I don't know. I like Ivan's work, Julia says, and he puts his feelings into them. He puts his hair into them, George says. Julia waves goodbye. Night, Ivan. Night, Bob. I press my nose against the glass and watch her walk away. All my work, all my planning, wasted. I look at Ruby sleeping soundly, and suddenly I know she'll never leave the Big Top Mall. She'll be here forever, just like Stella. I can't let Ruby be another one and only. Chest beating. Often when visitors come to see me, they beat their hands against their puny chests, pretending to be me. They pound away soundless as the wet wings of a new butterfly. The chest beating of a mad gorilla is not something you ever want to hear, not even if you're wearing earplugs, not even if you're 3 miles away wearing earplugs. A real chest beating sends the whole jungle running, as if the sky has broken open, as if men with guns were near. Angry. Thump. The sound, my sound, echoes through the mall. George and Julia spin around. Julia drops her backpack. George drops his keys. The pile of pictures go flying. Thump, thump, thump. I bounce off the walls. I screech and bellow. I beat and beat and beat my chest. Bob hides under no tag, his paws over his ears. I'm angry at last. I have someone to protect. Puzzle pieces. After a long while, I grow quiet. I sit. It's hard work being angry. Julia looks at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. I'm panting. I'm a little out of shape. What the heck was that? George demands. Something's really wrong, Julia says. I've never seen Ivan act this way. He seems to be calming down, thank goodness, George says. Julia shakes her head. He's still upset, Dad. Look at his eyes. My pictures are scattered all over the floor like huge autumn leaves. What a mess, George says, sighing. Wish I hadn't bothered sweeping tonight. Do you think Ivan's okay? Julia asks. Probably just a temper tantrum, George says. He reaches under the chair to retrieve a brown and red picture. Can't say I blame the guy. Stuck in that tiny cage all these years. Julia starts to answer, but then she freezes. She cocks her head. She stares at her feet, where my pictures lie in disarray. Dad, she whispers, Come see this. I'm sure he's another Rembrandt, George says. Let's pick these up and get going, Jules. I'm exhausted. Dad, she says again, seriously, look at this. George follows her gaze. I see blobs, many, many blobs, along with the occasional swirl. Please, can we go home? That's an H, Dad. Julia kneels down, straightening one picture, then another. That's an H, and here, she grabs some more pictures. Put this one here, and I don't know, maybe that one. You have an E. George rubs his eyes. I hold my breath. Julia's running now. She picks up one picture, sets down another. It's like a puzzle, Dad. This is something. It's a word, maybe words, and a picture of something, a giant picture. Jules, George says, this is crazy. But he's looking at the floor too, wondering from picture to picture and scratching his head. H, Julia says, E, O, ho? Julia chews her bottom lip. H, E, O, and that looks like an I. H, E, O, I. George writes in the air with his fingers. I, E, O, H. Not the letter, an actual I. And that's a foot. Or maybe a tree trunk, Dad. I think it's a trunk. Julia runs to my window. Ivan, she whispers, what did you make? I stare back. I cross my arms. This is taking much longer than I thought it would. Humans. Sometimes they make chimps look smart. Finally, Julia and George take the pictures to the ring, where there's a room to see them all. An hour passes as I try to assemble my puzzle. Ruby's awake now, and she and Bob and I watch. Ivan, Ruby says, is that a picture of me? Yes, I say proudly. Where am I supposed to be? That's a zoo, Ruby. See the walls and the grass and the people looking at you? Ruby squints. Who are all those other elephants? You haven't met them, I say, yet. It's a very nice zoo, Ruby says with an approving nod. Bob nudges me with his cold nose. It is indeed. In the ring, Julia pumps her fist in the air. Yes, she cries, I told you, Dad. That is an H-O-M-E, home. George gazes at the letters. He spins around to look at me. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Jules. You know, a once in a trillion kind of thing. Like the old saying goes about the chimp and the typewriter. Give him long enough and he'll write a novel. I make a grumbling noise, as if a chimp could write a letter, let alone a book. Then, how do you explain the rest of it, Julia demands. The picture of Ruby in the zoo? How do you know it's a zoo, George asks. Well, see the circles on the gate and the red giraffe in it? George squints and tilts his head. Are you sure that's a giraffe? I was thinking more along the lines of a deformed cat. It's the logo for the zoo, Dad. It's on all their signs. Explain that. George gives her a helpless smile. I can't begin to. I'm just saying there has to be a logical explanation. Look how big this is. Julia puts the last piece of Ruby's right ear into place. It's huge. It is definitely large, George agrees. Julia watches me. She chews on her thumb now. I see the question in her eyes. She turns back to the painting and stares at them, looking, truly looking. A slow smile dawns on Julia's face. Dad, she says, I have an idea, a big idea. Julia races around the edge of my painting, her arms spread wide. Billboard big. I'm not following you. I think this is meant to be on a billboard. That's what Ivan wants. George crosses his arms over his chest. What Ivan wants? He repeats slowly. And you know this because you two have been chatting? Because I'm an artist and he's an artist. Uh-huh, said George. Julia clasps her hands together. Come on, Dad, I'm begging you. George shakes his head. No, I'm not doing that. No billboard. No way. I'll get the ladder, Julia says. You get the glue. I know it's dark out, but the billboard's lit. Mac will fire me, Jules. Jules considers. But think of the publicity, Dad. Everyone would know about Ruby. You want me to put up a sign that shows Ruby in a zoo with the words home on it in giant letters. George gestures towards the pictures. A sign, incidentally, that just happens to have been made by a gorilla. Exactly. And you want me to do it without Mac's permission? George asks. Exactly. No, George says. No way. Julia goes to the edge of the ring, careful not to step on any of my paintings. She picks up Mac's claw stick. She walks back and hands it to her father. George runs a finger along the blade. She's just a baby, Dad. Don't you want to help her? But how would it help, Jules? Even if lots of people see Ivan's sign, it doesn't mean anything's going to change. I'm not exactly sure yet, Julia shakes her head. Maybe people will see the sign and they'll know this isn't where Ruby belongs. Maybe they'll want to help too. George sighs. He looks at Ruby. She waves her trunk. It's a matter of principle, Dad. Principle. Principal. L-E, George corrects. Dad, Julia says softly, what if Ruby ends up like Stella? George looks at me, at Ruby, at Julia. He drops the claw stick. The ladder, he says quietly, is in the storage locker. The next morning, I watch Mac's car slam to a halt in the parking lot. He leaps out. He stares at the billboard. His jaw is open. He doesn't move for a long time. Mad human. A mad gorilla is loud, but a mad human can be loud too, especially when he is throwing chairs and turning over tables and breaking the cotton candy machine. Phone call. Mac is kicking the trash can across the food court when the phone rings. He answers it, red-faced and sweating. What the? He demands, and he glares at me. I don't know what he starts to say, but then he stops to listen. Who? Julia, who? He asks. Oh, sure, George's kid. She's the one who called you? More talking with the phone to his ear. Matt comes closer to my cage, eyeing me suspiciously. Yeah, he says. He paints. Sure. We've been selling his art for quite a while now. There's another long pause. Yeah, absolutely. It was my idea. Mac nods. A smile starts at the corner of his mouth. Photos. No problem. You want to see him in action? Come on down. Have a look. We're open 365 days a year. You can't miss us. We're right off of I-95. Mac picks up the overturned trash can. Yeah, I think he'll be adding more pictures. It's what do you call it? A work in progress. When the phone call is done, Mac shakes his head. Impossible, he says. An hour later, a man with a camera comes to take my picture. He is from the local paper, the one Julia called. How about you take one of me with the elephant, Mac suggests, and he drapes his arm around Ruby's back, grinning as the camera clicks. Perfect, the man says. Perfect, Mac agrees. And there's Ruby and Mac. A star again. A photo of my billboard is in the newspaper. Mac tapes a story on my window. Each day more curious people arrive. They park in front of the billboard. They point and shake their heads. They take photos. Then they come into the mall and buy my paintings. While visitors watch, I dip my hands in fresh buckets of paint. I make pictures for the gift shop and pictures to add to the billboard. Trees with birds, a newborn elephant with glittering black eyes, a squirrel, a bluebird, a worm. I even paint Bob so that he can be on the billboard too. I can tell he likes the picture, although he says I didn't quite capture his distinguished nose. Every afternoon, Mac and George add my new pictures to the billboard. People slow their cars while they work. Drivers honk and wave. My gift shop pictures now cost $65 with a frame. The Ape Artist. I have new names. People call me the Ape Artist, the Primate Picasso. I have visitors from morning till night, and so does Ruby. But nothing changed for her. Every day at 2, 4, and 7, Ruby plods through the sawdust with Snickers on her back. Every night she has bad dreams. Bob, I say after I've soothed Ruby to sleep with a story, my idea isn't working. Bob opens one eye. Be patient. I'm tired of being patient, I say. Interview. This evening, a man and woman come to interview Mac and also George and Julia. The man has a large and heavy camera perched on his shoulder. He films me as I make my pictures. He films Ruby in her cage with her foot roped to the bolt in the floor. Mind if I take a look around, he asks. Mac waves a hand. Be my guest. While Mac and the woman talk, the cameraman walks through the mall. He pans his camera right and left, up and down, and when his eyes fall on the claw stick, he stops. He trains his camera on the gleaming blade. Then he moves on. The early news. Mac turns on the TV. We are on the early news at 5 o'clock. Bob says, don't let it go to my head. There we all are. Mac, Ruby, me, George and Julia, the billboard, the mall, the ring, and the claw stick. Signs on sticks. In the morning, several people gather in the parking lot. They're carrying signs on sticks. The signs have words and pictures on them. One has a drawing of a gorilla cradling a baby elephant. I wish I could read. Posters. More people with signs come today. They want Ruby to be free. Some of them even want Mac to shut down the mall. And you can see all those signs that says, free for Ruby, Ivan and Ruby, elephants are people too, animals need love. We love animals. And you can see right there, right here, you can see there's Ivan and there's Ruby. In the evening, George and Mac talk about them. Mac says they're protesting the wrong guy. He says they're going to ruin everything. He says, thanks for nothing, George. Mac stomps off. George, holding his mop, watches him leave. He rubs his eyes. He looks worried. Dad, Julia says, looking up from her homework, you know what my favorite sign was? George asks. Which one? The one that said, elephants are people too. George gives her a tired smile. He goes back to work. His mop moves across the empty food court like a giant blob, painting a picture no one will ever see. Check marks. A tall man with a clipboard and pencil comes to visit. He says he is here to inspect the property. He doesn't say much more, but he makes many check marks on his paper. He looks at my floor. Check. He examines Ruby's hay. Check. He eyes our water bowls. Check. Mac watches him, scowling. Bob is outside, hiding near the dumpster. He does not want to be a check mark. I love Bob. Free Ruby. Every day, there are more protesters and cameras with bright lights. Sometimes the people carrying signs out shout, Free Ruby! Free Ruby! Ivan, Ruby asks, why are people yelling my name? Are they mad at me? They're mad, I say, but not at you. A week later, the inspecting man comes back with a friend, a woman with smart, dark eyes like my mother's. She has a white coat on, and she smells of lobelia blossoms. Her hair is thick and brown, the color of a rotten branch teeming with luscious ants. She watches me for a long time. They're mad, I say, but not at you. A week later, the inspector comes back with a friend, a woman with smart dark eyes like my mother's. She has a white coat on and smells like blossoms. Her hair is thick and brown, the color of a rotten branch teeming with luscious ants. She watches me for a long time. Then she watches Ruby. She talks to the man. They both talk to Mac. The man gives Mac a piece of paper. Mac covers his face. He goes into the office and slams the door. New box. Something strange is happening. The white-coated woman is back and other humans. They place a large box in the center of the ring. It's Ruby-sized. And suddenly I know why the woman is here. She's here to take Ruby away. Training. The woman leads Ruby to the box. She places an apple inside. Good girl, Ruby, she says kindly. Don't be afraid. Ruby inspects the box with her trunk. The woman makes a clicking sound with a little piece of metal she is holding in her hand. She gives Ruby a piece of carrot. Each time Ruby touches the box, she gets a click and a treat. Why is she making that clicking noise? I ask Bob. They do that to dogs all the time, Bob says. I can tell you he doesn't approve. It's called clicker training. They want Ruby to associate the noise with the treat. When she does something they want, they make that noise. Great job, Ruby, the woman says. You're a quick study. After many clicks and carrots, she takes Ruby back to her cage. Why is the lady giving me carrots when I touch the box? Ruby asks me. I think she wants you to go inside, I explain. But there's nothing inside, Ruby says, except an apple. Inside the box, I said, is the way out. Ruby tilts her head. I don't get it. See the picture of the red giraffe on the box? I think the lady is from the zoo, Ruby. I think she's getting ready to take you there. I wait for Ruby to trumpet with joy, but instead she just stares at the box in silence. I'm not sure you understand. That box might be taking you to a place where there are other elephants, I say, a place with more room and humans who care about you. But even as I say those words, I remember with a shudder the last box I was in. I don't want a zoo, Ruby says. I want you and Bob and Julia. This is my home. No, Ruby, this is a prison. Poking and prodding. Poking and prodding. The lady comes again. She brings an animal doctor with an awful smell and a dangerous looking bag. He spends an hour with Ruby, poking and prodding. He looks at her eyes, her feet, her trunk. When he's done with Ruby, he enters my cage. I wish I could hide under no tag like Bob. Instead, I do a nice loud chest beat, and after a moment, the doctor retreats. We're going to need to put this one under, he says. I'm not quite sure what he means, but I strut around my cage feeling victorious anyways. No painting. No one asked me to paint today. No one asked Ruby to perform. There are no shows, no visitors, unless you count the protesters. Max stays in his office all day. More boxes. I wake up from a long morning nap. Bob is on my belly. He isn't just asleep, he's watching the ring, where 4 men are placing a large metal box. It's me-sized. What's that? I ask, still blurry from sleep. Bob nuzzles my chin. I believe that box is for you, my friend. I'm not sure what he means. Me? They brought in a bunch of boxes while you were sleeping. Looks to me like they're taking the whole lot of you, he says casually, licking a paw. Even Thelma. Taking, I repeat. Taking us where? Well, some to the zoo, probably. Others to an animal shelter where humans will try to find them homes, Bob shakes himself. So, I guess all good things must come to an end, huh? His voice is bright, but his eyes are far away and sad. I'm going to miss your stomach, big guy. Bob shuts his eyes. He makes an odd sound in his throat. But what about you? I ask. I can't tell if Bob's just pretending to sleep, but he doesn't answer. I gaze at the huge shadowy box, and suddenly I understand how Ruby feels. I don't want to go into that box. The last time I was in a box, my sister died. And we'll pause right there. And hopefully we'll be able to finish our story when we come back tomorrow. I hope you guys have a wonderful day and enjoy this gorgeous sunshine. It's outside. Take care.